welcome to our review of what we saw at the 2024 Summer Fancy Food Show. Mike and I were both in New York. We just got back a couple of days ago and wanted to share with everyone some of the very interesting innovation we saw. And I would say, and I think, Mike, you agree, that this Summer Fancy Food Show did have a lot of really interesting innovation.
Agreed, absolutely. In comparison to the winter show, and I think this is always true to some extent just because of the size of the summer fancy food show, but it still felt like, yeah, we tried a lot more interesting flavors, new product categories. We have a slide at the end of this that's just kind of really new in your face innovation, which I don't know if we had anything like that necessarily at the winter fancy food show, but it is a huge show too. I mean, I think they said every booth sold out. We, over the couple days we were there, didn't even see the entire thing. I actually broke my shoes walking the show. It was so huge.
You did, right? There was a lot of hard walking at the show.
It was. Our lives are really difficult, absolutely.
Next time
Should we
we'll
get right
have
into it and just get into some of these products? And, we've kind of organized them by some of the innovation categories that we saw them playing in. And so some of it was packaging design. We certainly saw some great packaging. I think the Fancy Food Show is, of all the shows in the industry, one of the best shows to actually see really new, unique graphic designs, actually packaging kind of textures, which we were actually at the Fancy Food Show in order to present on the new path to purchase. And one of the stats that we showcased that comes from a survey that we recently did was just how important packaging is to consumers. And so the number one thing that actually turns off consumers is too much packaging. If you have packaging waste, if they feel like they have to open up multiple different packaging, they hate that. Number two is texture. They don't like things that, I think the phrase that was in there was just feel weird to them. So we definitely saw some really nice packaging at the show. In the upper left here was one of the first things that we saw at the show, which was an olive oil in this stainless steel, vase here. And so the cool thing about it was there's a ton of olive oil at the show. Italy has the largest pavilion at the show. Spain has the second largest pavilion at the show. So you can imagine how much olive oil there is. And it all tends to be in those green bottles that are kind of dark and, they all look the same on the shelf. So this really stands out. It felt really substantial. It felt, kind of premium. And then it also has a functional kind of quality to it, which is that you can recycle it, number one. So there's the sustainability angle to it. But also, light is the enemy of olive oil. And so, no light is getting into this package. So you can keep it out in your kitchen. And I forget, he had some percentages. It was like after how long, 6 months, a year, something like that, the quality was still at 80 to 90% what it would have been when it first went in the bottle. Whereas he said if light gets through the bottle, I remember he said the quality drops like 60% or something. So really interesting one.
We did see more aluminum being used at this
Yeah.
point, which I think is probably not surprising. We saw that at NRA as well. There was quite a bit of aluminum work. Part of it is, well, a large part of it is that it's more recyclable. I mean, I think 90% of aluminum gets recycled at some astronomical amount where it's 10% of everything else really is getting recycled. The other thing that company with the olive oil was doing that I thought was amazing, so smart, was their business cards were made out of leftovers from the actual olive oil processing. So they were taking the fibers left over from the pulp and were creating business cards out of it, which I was like, genius.
Wasn't that great? Absolutely.
Yeah,
Agree. Yes. In the middle here, so this product was really good. So it's a clean label product, but we chose it because of the packaging, because, you're at the show, it's the Fancy Food Show. It tends to be a lot of modern brands. So you see a lot of that millennial marketing. You see a lot of the kind of goofy fonts everywhere, a lot of bright colors. And so anything that strayed from that really stood out, actually. And this was clearly, a nostalgia play. It was clearly that you're going into that bakery and you're getting that, little baker's box where the baker is actually taking baker's twine and wrapping it around it. It makes you think of if you've ever been to Mike's Pastry, the cannoli shop in Boston, or, one of those old school bakeries. So this is Mike's Philly Fluff, which is a pound cake company. And this is what the packaging looks like on the retail shelf. It looks like you got it directly from the bakery. So we talked to the guy, it was clearly a key decision to make sure that they carried through, kind of the feel and the nostalgia and the heritage of the brand in the packaging.
which I think, and this was not the only brand that had this old style packaging,
Mm-hmm.
this old style font. And I think that this does get to what you and I have talked about several times now, is the idea of era envy, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is really apart from nostalgia. I think nostalgia is thinking back on times that you have experienced, right? You can't have nostalgia for what you have never
Mm-hmm.
experienced, right? I think era envy is speaking far more to the fact that so many people are dissatisfied with the now, and rather than looking forward, hoping that things will get better, they are increasingly looking backward and thinking things have been much better in the past. And
Absolutely.
it's interesting that that is now playing out with packaging design as well.
And it kind of speaks to what is in the package as well. So,
Yes.
part of that era envy is probably this idea that, when the bakeries made it in the past, they were using those simple ingredients that I could pronounce. And so, even if you didn't grow up in that, time period, that's what you think about, in the 50s, in the 60s, that was my grandma's bakery where they were using pure butter and flour. And so, even if you didn't grow up in that era, this packaging gets to the idea that the thing in the box probably also, has those same features that you might, kind of look to in the past in the 50s or 60s or whenever I think that's what this packaging makes me think of. And you think it is that cleaner ingredient. You think it is a simpler time.
It's also interesting. It just occurred to me as we were talking through this. It also goes to one of the core consumer needs that you and I have talked about, is making life easier.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the packaging might be cool looking. A lot of these fonts you and I were talking about are almost impossible to read, though they may be standout fonts. But this is very easy to read. It's very simple to understand what it is. There's no obs obfuscation. No, that's not right.
Yeah,
You might
yeah.
have to edit that out. There's no obscuring what's in the package, right? I mean, it's very easy to know exactly what this is, and I think that there's something to be said for not making packaging and fonts so cute that it's almost impossible to know what the heck you're supposed to be buying.
Right, absolutely agree.
Yeah,
And the name is great. I mean, what a fantastic name to call a
yeah.
product. Put Mike on anything, and I think you're going to sell
There
more.
you go.
And then,
Right?
real quick, we took a picture of this. I've actually seen this come up in a number of articles on great packaging. It comes up as an example all the time. And I had seen it so often in those articles. I didn't think it was a real product. I thought it was a student, like something that a student had done for their graphic design project or something like. So actually seeing it at the show that it is a great product. I mean, I always kind of post a roundup of the things that we saw at the show on LinkedIn and Facebook. And this one I got multiple comments on because it stands out so much. It's so clever, it's so fun, it's so creative.
Yeah. And it does speak to the power of the female dollar right now, right? Though I might be a
Absolutely.
little biased, but it's true that women have an enormous spending material or spending power. And it's not like everything that we want is, homogenous. And I think it's just such a unique take on how to appeal to women.
Agreed, agreed, yes. And so there's always a lot of chips and snacks at the show, but I would say this time, there was a lot of flavor innovation in chips and
Yes.
snacks at the show, but a lot of format innovation in those chips and snacks as well.
Mhm.
I don't know, though the one in the upper left here, we both talked about, I know.
Oh, these chips were, first of all, delicious, right? Which they
Hmm.
have to be no matter what. But what you and I really appreciated was they were not trying to hide that they were incorporating a lot of vegetables and other plant-based materials in it. They were showcasing it. It was part of the design, it was part of the visual appeal, which, yes, why does it need to look like something that's, very easily accessible, potato chips that are all over the place? Make it appreciate what it is, something that's unique. And I thought that they were gorgeous to look at as well as
Right.
tasty.
They look
Delicious.
almost like a tie-dye chip, like,
Yeah,
yes, it's so attractive.
yeah,
And when you consider, so I know, sometimes you see on charcuterie boards or in catering, applications, you see people using the veggie chips a lot just because of the pure color factor. And,
right.
you have something that you're adding to the plate that adds that cool hue to it. So another great option here.
Exactly. And
Um,
that's what we talked about with the grand potatoes, which are on the opposite side,
Hmm.
those really long, super thin potato chips, which are different, right? In that they don't have all the color that the chips on the far left do, but they're also upscale looking. They are not your average snack. They would be just as upscale on a charcuterie board or any other kind of upscale snack offering or side offering. So I think it's really unique that there are a number of manufacturers trying to again upscale the average, I guess.
Absolutely, yes. It's funny that so you actually saw these chips at a convenience store in New York, showed them to me, and we're so excited about that because they are. They're so cool. They come in a plastic tray, so it is very upscale. They're long.
Mhm.
I mean, it's hard to see in this picture, but they're truly long. I think they're like 8 inches, 10
Very
inches,
long.
something like that.
Yeah.
And they feel very luxurious. Like it feels like a luxurious snacking occasion. And so you had already kind of called them out, and then we saw them at the show. So it just kind of shows how impactful they are and how different. It's not another, bag on
Same.
the shelf that has the same chili flavors or whatever. They really were a really great upscale option. And I think in a similar vein, next to it here, so this was an Indian brand that was taking a traditional Indian cracker and kind of switching it up for the international market. So I believe they said that they were entering the European market and then the US market, obviously. And so they had the Indian flavors, but then they also would have global flavors as well. So there's pizza in there. You can see in the corner they have a piri piri flavor there, then tomato flavor. And they're big. Again, like the grand potato chips, they're bigger. So it's not like, one Ritz cracker or something like that. And I think the nice thing about the one, again, they were delicious and they had a really great tender texture to them. But for an afternoon snacking occasion, as kind of that tartine, or putting something on top of there, take two of those out, put some avocados, everything bagel seasoning. I think that kind of transform what is just a cracker that you're opening up into a truly snacking occasion, or even possibly a lunch occasion or something like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was interesting how many of the things that we looked at had that super thin texture, super
Hmm.
thin weight, right? Not leaning toward the heavier, thicker, substantial texture to the actual product. They were definitely skewing toward the hyper thin, which I thought was an interesting trend.
Agreed. I know there were a few jerkies like that now that you say
Yes,
it. Very thin, crispy jerkies as
like
well. Yeah. And
shattering.
there's an
Yep.
elegance to them. Yeah. That,
Yes,
it's a different play than the bold, really, really thick chips. And then,
absolutely.
and the lower left here. So this was a British brand. And so they make premium potato chips in flavors that, you would find kind of in the UK market a little bit more. This was a Wagyu beef and honey mustard flavor that they did. But they called it bubbly and serrano chili flavor. So it was champagne or champagne adjacent flavor with serrano chilies. And the representative at the booth was like, you are actually going to taste the champagne in two ways. You're going to taste it from the flavor of the champagne, but you will get that bubbly texture on your tongue. And I didn't really believe her at first. And when you try, maybe it's just because she cues you up and you're like, yeah, I do taste it. But I did feel like I tasted it. If it's not like Pop Rocks, but there is a bubbliness and effervescence on your tongue when you taste it. And if anything, I would say the champagne flavor was more pronounced than the Serrano chili flavor was
Mm,
actually. So a
interesting.
great flavor profile. But then they've also been selling them in the UK market in these cans. So again, another aluminum can, stainless steel can here. Profile. So they stand out. It's another, just like we were talking about with the grand potato chips. It's not another bag on the shelf. It's something again very upscale here. And she said that it's been very successful for them, so they're going to launch that in the U.S. market as well.
Yeah, love it.
Wow, so much honey at the show. There's
Oh,
always a lot of honey at the show, but there was a lot of honey innovation at the show, I would say.
yes, which was interesting. Honey obviously has been very on trend for a number of different reasons, hot honey just through to alternative sweetener. But I would say the focus on the quality of the flavor of honey in unique ways, right? Not just flavored honey. There was a lot of flavored honey, very unique flavors of
Hmm.
honey, but the quality of the honey, which is what we see with the new honey on the left, it was hard to describe how incredible that honey tasted. And that was
Mm-hmm.
the honey that was, it was bees that were getting the pollen from the rainforest canopy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was so complex, almost had savory notes to it.
Mm-hmm.
It really was, it was spectacular.
And that was the second one too that I think we talked about Dr. B on the last time that we did one of these roundups. So there's another brand that's always at the show called Dr. B. And these two brands, multiple brands do it, but these two really centered this story of the bees being from kind of untouched locations. So
Mhm.
you're not getting any of the chemicals that you might get. Dr. B is from a Canadian mountain. So, we're not using fertilizers or anything like that on the flowers or the crops in those areas. So they really kind of lean into this untouched, really clean. There's not going to be any chemical residue or pesticides in the honey. So really interesting. And then on the right-hand side here, this was, they had a wide range of honeys, but I thought the avocado honey was really interesting because it was actually avocado blossoms in Mexico that the bees are exclusively being raised on. And so again, the complexity of the flavor profile here, it was different from any honey I'd ever had before. So, and it's a natural way of showcasing those flavor differences, which I think really appeals to a lot of consumers.
Yeah, completely agree.
Oh, these we we love these for
These were
multiple
very
reasons.
exactly. So you saw the hot sauce. I did not see the hot sauce because I had to leave a little early. But the coffee on the left, the coffee concentrate on the left, loved that so much for so many different reasons. Number one, it's extending the spectrum, I would say, of what caffeination actually is. So it wasn't decaf versus caffeinated or even like decaf, caffeinated, and like hyper caf or something like that. The spectrum was so much more granular for
Hmm.
their product line, and just the way that they were positioning it, the Maverick, the Alchemist, the Classic, was evocative, it was romantic. It really spoke to somebody emotionally. I thought it was just such a fantastic product and such a fantastic play for a category that is so familiar to consumers.
Absolutely, right? And so they have four different levels, and each of those levels has this naming convention on it. And so it goes, yeah, all the way from, I think it's like 99.95% caffeine free, all the way to the extra caffeinated one that you see here, which is, I don't know, double caffeine or whatever it
Yep.
is. And so each of those has this, you're a maverick if you love, having a lot of caffeine. I think the one where that doesn't have any caffeine or very minimal caffeine is like the daydreamer
That
or the
was the J
dreamer or
Dreamer.
something
Yep.
like that. So whatever your choice is, it makes you feel like, like, I don't know, I am a dreamer or I am a magician, or, I think they did a really good job. And there you can see that too. That is what they lead with on the package is, what your personality profile is. And then similarly, I think, getting at that granularity of the flavor profiles or the taste profiles or what consumers want from their products is this Hank sauce here. So they say at the bottom here, it's not very hot sauce. And we've been talking about for years, everything is spicy. We saw tons of
Yeah.
spicy stuff at the show, and everything is getting more and more spicy. We're putting, ghost peppers in. We're putting, that we found the hottest pepper in the middle of a rainforest in the middle of nowhere to, blow your mind. There are those consumers that's a turnoff for them. They don't like,
A
want
lot.
their tongue to be on fire when they eat things. And so they specifically, this is not a very hot sauce. It's about the flavor. Yes, there's a spice to it. So again, getting at the granularity of those consumer needs and what they want and looking for the gaps in the market where you could exist in as a product.
Well, and this was inevitable, right? Because you're absolutely correct. It's been skewing for so long to getting hotter and hotter and hot. Like, how hot can we go before we really start running into major problems? That inevitably, like every trend, there's going to be the counter trend. There's going to be the backlash trend. There's going to be that trend that swings all the way to the other side. But in this case, you were swinging all the way to the other side, but the other side is actually a really large share of the population who simply does not want to hurt when they're eating things.
Right? Yes, absolutely. And even for both of these two, I think the nice thing, decaf is not necessarily a cool product to say I'm a decaf drinker. Or, you know, hot sauce, it's not necessarily cool to be like, I like mild hot sauce, you know? And so these are ways of getting at those kind of consumer need states in a way that does not turn them off, that makes them feel kind of cool and excited, you know? I think this Hank sauce branding, it looks like hot sauce branding. It looks in your face. I mean, that's a really cool, fun logo there. So it's not necessarily about, you know, what you're getting rid of or the, you know, kind of choice that you're making that, you know, maybe is not as cool or on trend. It's making a decision that is personal to you and is also cool and exciting and fun.
Well, and this is the language issue with mocktails, well, mocktails, right, which we're not supposed
Mm-hmm.
to use, which we shouldn't be using, but non-alcoholic cocktails. There's no reason why those should be the also ran options or the embarrassing run options. Use language that's inclusive, that is just as evocative, that is just as exciting, that appreciates those products for what they are and the reasons that people are going to them, rather than making them feel like somehow they're not as cool as the other people or somehow they're getting the lesser than product.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of global pizza at the show, which is interesting because we were just working on a project and we were talking about some of the categories at the supermarket that still don't necessarily have those global flavors that you see in other categories at the supermarket. So pasta sauce was one category. You know, you still see a lot of the marinaras and kind of the traditional Italian flavor profiles. But the frozen pizza aisle, you are starting to see some of those global flavors show up. So I do think you will see some of those flavors kind of make the leap over to the pasta sauce aisle at some point here. But the brand on the left here, and I think it's really clever. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, but I think it is pronounced pizza, but because it's the 00 flour, so you know it's like the two Z's. But it's a brand that does Asian inspired frozen pizzas here, and so they are done kind of in the flat packs here, so you can actually see the whole pizza. And they have a restaurant, and so they're going to retail from here. The Asian flavors that they did, they had like the Hainanese chicken, they had was one of them. We had the miso eggplant, and
Oh,
you know, this is not necessarily about what we think was delicious, but it was delicious,
but that
and
being said, right?
you know, it really was. We both loved it, but it tasted like a restaurant style
Yeah.
Neapolitan pizza with this. I mean, the miso flavor really came through. I think eggplant is a difficult thing to do in any application, let alone in a frozen application. So they were really successful with it.
Well, and the
So,
crispiness of that crust
right.
was really amazing. And it wasn't just that it was a hard crunch into it, but it was that shatter crispy, right?
Mm-hmm,
It was that
mm-hmm.
really great crispiness. It was a great product.
Absolutely. It felt like, you know, if you were, I feel like the commercial should be one of those, we're tricking the consumer, where, you know, we're telling them that it's coming out of the restaurant oven, and then you figure out that it's a frozen product, but it would have fooled us, you know,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And then, you know, we've obviously seen a number of the Indian inspired pizza operators opening up across the country. And so this was a brand that we saw at the show. I do have to call out a little bit talking about the difficult font choices sometimes. I wasn't sure. I think it is Gourmet. I think that is
I believe
the
that is
brand here, I
correct. Yeah.
believe. But they were doing a chicken shawarma pizza, and the shawarma itself was very juicy, very flavorful on the pizza. So
Mhm.
another, you know, I believe it's DiGiorno. It's don't quote me if it's DiGiorno, but they have a new chimichanga inspired pizza that is part of the marketing platform for the new Deadpool movie. But
Oh,
again, you know, kind of a larger brand getting into some of these more global flavor profiles in frozen pizzas.
yeah. In general, as you're switching to the next slide, there were a lot of Indian cuisine centric or inspired by innovation. So Indian cuisine, if we were to call out any cuisine that was the underlying thread, I would say Indian cuisine was probably it.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah, and the same way, yeah, it was Latin years ago, and then Asian kind of Indian was by far. I would agree with you
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
And
So
speak of the
this
devil, yeah.
maybe not the devil. Let's not say that. Yeah, right. But so this was actually very interesting. I don't know that any of us would have expected freeze dried to be making such a play. I mean, I will say that when we had the cafe, I started using freeze dried fruit for applications and kind of
Mhm.
couldn't understand. They're used extensively in Europe for a lot of their
Hmm.
baked goods. You don't see it used very often in the States. And I was thinking, why not? And at the show, we saw a lot of freeze dried innovation. Of course, you've got the freeze dried candy, which is on the right, which is unbelievable how it changes of what you're expecting from a product. So
Hmm.
the gummy in particular, like the gummy rings, it was amazing how different it was.
Shatters
Yeah,
in your mouth. Yeah.
almost mind blowing how
Hmm.
it changed not just the texture, but even the flavor. And it was true
Hmm.
across the board. But then on the far left, right? So now you're seeing freeze dried being applied to, in this case, these Indian products, which, by the way, had, again, really fantastic flavor once they were reconstituted into the finished product.
Absolutely, agreed. And I think the interesting thing is, the freeze-dried candy became so big on social media. It was a kind of an at-home thing. So there were a number of at-home entrepreneurs who were buying freeze dryers, creating the freeze-dried Skittles and gummy rings and things like that, and then selling them through TikTok shops or Etsy or whatever it may be. Really became big. I know at the Sweets and Snacks Expo, there was a huge number of freeze-dried candy options, ice cream options. And I think that, if you see Gen Z really gravitating, and it's called freeze-dried candy, they use that terminology. So if you
Right.
see that younger generation, interacting with freeze-dried foods in a way that gets them excited, it gives you permission to use freeze drying as an application in a wide range of products. I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next few years here.
Well, and as we think about, and this might be taking a leap, right? Not to say that people aren't going to be refrigerating food, but as you think about sustainability and our issue
Hmm.
with energy, and how do we start minimizing the energy that we need, whether it's at home or in restaurants, professional settings, we will inevitably have to start looking for options that allow us to shelf stable store things. And so
Absolutely.
if freeze dried ends up being that thing, if the technology can improve, if the products can improve so that the final product is meeting all of our other needs, and oh, by the way, it allows us to reduce our energy consumption, I mean, where's the loss there?
Win, win, win.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you,
Oh, sorry. Did I
nope.
cut you off?
Well, I wasn't sure if you wanted to touch on the middle product.
Oh, sure. Well, and so this was a true kind of freeze-dried fruit product, but it is positioned as a snack. So, a lot of times, yeah, you do see, freeze-dried fruit as an ingredient, or actually, to your point, Maeve, I use freeze-dried fruit. I pulverize it in the Cuisinart and
Yep.
fold it into pastry creams and
Yep.
frostings and
Exactly.
things like that, because it's not adding any liquid. So, but this was truly a freeze-dried snacking product. And so I think that the nice thing about all three of these being on the same screen here is it shows you the breadth of kind of what you can do when it comes to, this particular application. On the left-hand side, we're freeze drying a product that you add a little bit of water to it, and you're going to have that same Indian experience that you might get at a restaurant operator. It's authentic, it's true, you're recreating that experience at home. In the middle here, it's a healthy play. It's truly just the fruit that we freeze dried. It has a textural difference to it. Like you said, it's shelf stable. It's not going to go bad. But this is a little bit of a healthier product. So that's kind of the branding here, authenticity on the left side. And then on the right side, pure fun. You're having, ice cream and candy and weird stuff. So I think that's the nice thing about this is that just kind of the breadth of applications, the breadth of marketing, kind of targets that you might be wanting to hit.
You're absolutely right.
Oh, chocolate. Always so interesting at the show. And there always is a lot of chocolate at the show, but there definitely was this year, particularly in a lot of the global booths. So a lot of the global pavilions had a lot of interesting chocolate coming out, which is not a surprise considering we've worked in some global chocolate categories in the past, and there's a lot of innovation happening around the world. So I think there's a lot of learnings for us in the U.S. And I think there's going to be a lot of products coming from overseas into the US market. On the left-hand side, this was spring and mulberry. So this is a 100% date sweetened chocolate. So they don't use sugar at all. I wouldn't have known. I honestly, I think it does add kind of a depth of flavor, but I honestly thought there was some sugar in it as well. I didn't know it was all date sweetened, but it is fully date sweetened. But the mulberry fennel flavor was fantastic. It was phenomenal. It was deep and dark from those mulberries. You had the, those berry notes to it, but then the fennel added that savory note to it. I think that, the savory notes that we're seeing in chocolate in a really wide range of applications and flavor combinations is just so fascinating. Another one here being this dessert series from Monsoon Chocolate. So they had the blue corn atoll white chocolate here. So again, conjures up a place for you. It feels like you're going on a little trip when you try, and it's different. I don't think we've ever seen kind of a desert series or something that calls that out. Both of these really, really well done. I think on the other side here, a pure kind of fun, wacky, challenge yourself to try it because it's weird, is the dill pickle fudge, which we didn't actually try at the show, but we had to take a picture of it while we were there.
Absolutely. And then on the far right is in the far right picture on the far right is a rosemary based chocolate. And I could not agree with you more, Mike, that if anybody wants inspiration on what you can do with flavor plays, how you can take a category and rethink what that category means, how you can transfer flavors from one platform to another, chocolate is the category that everybody should be paying attention to, and not just in the States, worldwide.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you consider that chocolate is the #1 dessert flavor on food service menus, you still do not see the flavor play that you see on the retail side in the CPG applications. I really think food service can take a lesson from how much innovation when it comes to flavor is happening at CPG and, give themselves permission to do some a little bit more out there stuff when it comes to those menu applications.
Absolutely agree. And beverages, obviously.
Beverages.
Always a lot. So this was just a roundup of some of the interesting, as you can imagine, there's a ton going on in the beverage category. One that we thought was really interesting was top, kind of middle to the right-ish, is the Malk product, where at their stand, they, as you can see with that poster, they were allowing you to create your own milk product. And it was this build your own oat-based milk product with flavors and other inclusions you could end up adding into it to create completely customized, unique products, which I think for a category that has, first of all, been growing so much, but has also become so mainstream, it's like, what's the next evolution? Well, this was definitely that next evolution.
Absolutely. And then the Gwyneth too, speaking to how we were talking a little bit earlier about not showcasing that anybody has to give up something when they're making a choice with the product. This Gwyneth drink in the lower right-hand corner here. So they specifically say, we are a cocktail. They don't say mocktail. They don't say spirit-free. It is non-alcoholic, but they use that cocktail language. And when you go to their website, they say, we're not cosplaying as, I think the terminology they use is we're not cosplaying as alcoholics, actually. They're very in your face about it. You're not giving something out, but we are flavor forward. This is a drink that, whether you drink alcohol or don't drink alcohol, you should crave it. You should want to have it. And so they really lean into that with their branding.
And that's something that you and I have absolutely talked about several times. A lot of these non-alcoholic spirit companies, I think, are not doing themselves a favor by constantly saying that they are the alternative of gin or vodka or bourbon, or because inevitably there's going to be something lacking from that experience. No offense to any of those brands. They're putting out some really interesting products, but somebody who wants bourbon, that's not going to be a one-to-one substitute for a whole number of reasons. So why not embrace what you are and stop saying that you are a substitute for something that you are not?
Right? Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other pictures were just interesting flavors.
Yeah, some really interesting flavors in there. This was, we've seen this at the show for the past few years, but I would say the evolution here, and this is some of the savory snacks, specifically around granola and granola bars, or, granola, like the Sweet Deliverance kind of loose granola here, or some of those protein bars or things like that, that were leaning into the savory flavor profiles, but doing a really good job with it. I think this was an area that there was a lot of, kind of innovation for years, but they weren't necessarily getting the flavor profiles correct or the textures correct. And I think it's come a long way, actually. So the Sweet Deliverance, I went up to the stand there, and the two people that had started it we're talking about all of the various ingredients that they had put into their granola. But this is the one option that really leans savory for them, the turmeric and super seed granola. And it did. It really had a savory flavor profile. And they said it's doing really, really well for them. The Afar had a great line of all savory leaning bars. So these are protein bars. This is the Japanese miso here. They had an everything bagel seasoning one, I know. I think there was a chili lime one. But again, if you don't necessarily want to have that sweet snacking occasion, if you want something that feels a little bit more like it's replacing or, in addition to that savory lunch that you might have, there's some really good options out there right now. But this is salad grab and go. So it's literally salad flavor profiles in these grab and go kind of snackable options here.
Yeah.
Oh, so fun. All the Gotham steampunk branding at the show.
Which was something that occurred to us after being at the show for the whole day and having seen several products that were leaning into either goth or steampunk and similar iterations of those, that it suddenly occurred to us that this is a broader trend. Like, this was definitely, from an aesthetic point of view, something that we saw running throughout the show. And I don't know. I mean, it might be an interesting statement as to where we might be psychologically as a nation at the moment. That this is what's really appealing to us. But I think that it's true, right? I mean, we're definitely in the middle of a perma-funk. The consumer sentiment numbers are at their lowest that they've been for quite some time. In fact, if you exclude the pandemic, they're lower than they have been for almost a decade.
Mhm.
So I think there's a reason why these somewhat darker, whether it's leaning far into the dark, like the Black Skeleton, or the somewhat fantastical darkness, right, that you get from steampunk, still speaks to a somewhat dark mood. And I think that's probably where we largely are at right now.
Absolutely. And they do stand out as, when we were talking about some of that millennial or Gen Z branding, you see the pastel colors and the bright
Yes.
colors and things like that. These brands really, you saw people taking pictures of all of these products here. You saw people taking pictures with the skull in the center there. So they really do stand out on the shelf at the show itself. So, if you're looking to differentiate yourself at a time when, sometimes people are leaning into that bed rotting and I'm, anxious and annoyed, I think that it's okay to lean into that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does satisfy an urge, right, to get those products. And
Absolutely.
butter.
Oh, butter.
Who
So
said
much
butter
butter
was
at the
dead?
show.
It certainly
And the
is not.
interesting thing was, I think for years, the story kind of out of the fancy food show when it came to butter was plant-based butter. The past few shows, it was plant-based butter, plant-based butter, plant-based butter. And whereas this show, I didn't see nearly as much plant-based butter. There were some, and I think the quality has really increased. I think we've seen that Gartner hype cycle. Some of the bad plant-based butter brands have kind of fallen away, and the ones that have kind of figured it out have survived. But compound butters we saw all over the show, and really well done compound butters across the spectrum. Sweet, savory, approachable, premium, kind of all over the board. This was an uni butter from Regalis Foods, so actually incorporating fresh uni into the butter itself. Really rich, really luxurious. This was a smoked butter that had those smoky flavor profiles in it. And then this was the brand that it was actually the founder's mother was at the booth, which was great. She was really excited to kind of showcase her daughter's brand, but they had a wide range of compound butters that they were showcasing.
Yeah, everything from chili, which had a nice kick to it without being overpowering, all the way through to that blueberry cinnamon butter, I think it was. It was definitely blueberry that was just had a spectacular blueberry flavor. I mean, sometimes with blueberry, you can get that more muted or kind of dull blueberry flavor, but this had a really bright, fresh blueberry taste to it. In fact, a woman came up while we were tasting that.
Yeah,
She grabbed a
yeah.
taste of it and she was blown away. So I think, yeah, butter is definitely in compound butters in particular. So I think that's something that can have such an impact across every part of the menu, every day part. Yeah, a lot to do with that.
And I think, it's not like compound butters are new, obviously. They've been used in restaurant kitchens for years. But I think there's both the fact that consumers have gone back to butter. We
Mhm.
don't necessarily use the replacements and the margarines. And there's this idea that, having a little bit of butter, having a little bit of real fat is okay in my diet. And so, there's a play there. And then also from that chef perspective, you see shows like The Bear, and, it's cool to be a chef, and, chefs use compound butter. I mean, how many times have we seen the articles in Food and Wine or Bon Appetit to, really make your steak, restaurant worthy? You got to use that rosemary compound butter. So I think there's multiple kind of plays here that really excite consumers.
Right. And that does feed into that consumer need to live well, right? I
Mhm.
mean, if you're going to have butter, have great butter, like go for it, right? Don't have it all the time. But if you are
Yeah.
going to treat yourself, then treat yourself. Yeah.
And then we saw there's always a lot of proteins at the show, a lot of charcuterie at the show. We had from this brand, so this is Fossil Farms, and they do alternative proteins, but alternative proteins meaning alternatives to the ones that we, eat the most often, chicken, pork, beef. These are elk, ostrich, kangaroo. And so they use a lot of those proteins that, are not necessarily being eaten very often by particularly American consumers. And one, they turn them into a premium product. You can see the packaging is very premium. The placement is very premium. And the dish that we had there was an elk nigiri that had it was a New Zealand cold smoked elk that was over a foie gras, like a mousse, I want to say, and a sticky rye. It was fantastic. It was truly phenomenal.
Completely
And
agree.
I just remember there was a brand called Vow that was out of Australia when all of the meat alternatives were so popular, and they
Yep.
were saying that was their whole marketing that they were trying to come up with. Do you remember this brand, the Australian
They were
Vow brand? And
actually
they
I
did.
covered them at a presentation, I think geez, before the pandemic, as a matter of fact. I think it was one of my
Okay.
last presentations. Yeah, where they were growing ostrich meat, right? That
Yes.
was their whole thing. And why not, right? This is the conversation that we are going to inevitably get into with cellular agriculture, that if what we're doing is in a petri dish, that's first of all, we could eat almost anything, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what's to keep us from eating tiger and elephant, and obviously without the death, which would be nice,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then at some point, we will start splicing these meats together, because you don't have to worry about the breeding issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of having to cross these things. It's going to end up happening that once it's in a petri dish, a lot of the boundaries and a lot of the barriers that exist in the biological world will start breaking down, and it will be maybe both fascinating and horrifying to see what
And
ends up coming out of it.
yeah. And it made me think of them seeing this brand because I remember they kept saying, what are the chances that the 3 to 4 proteins that we eat every day are the most delicious proteins? We are scanning, every protein source imaginable to find the ones that truly are delicious and, that have flavor profiles that maybe we don't eat all the time. And so it really opened my eyes up to the idea that I should be eating more of these alternative proteins. And they are delicious. Venison, elk, they do have great flavor profile. Even lamb, we don't eat nearly as much lamb as
No,
we
yeah.
could in this country. So really great. And their story, they do a really good, if you have a chance, we won't get into it, but check out their website, the story they tell about where they, get the proteins that they're sourcing and their sustainability efforts is really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the far right, not to skip over Locks in a Box, I thought Locks in a Box was very interesting. This idea of making seafood convenient and increasing the convenience of seafood for portability. But on the right hand side, that 50 cut, that is a 50-50 blend of mushroom and protein. And it was delicious. They had different sausages, breakfast sausage, Italian sausage. You never would have known that there was mushroom in there. It was a fantastic product. Texture was there, the taste was there. It looked exactly like what you were anticipating. It was great.
So juicy. People are raving. Sometimes you're at a booth and people are raving and you think there's plants. Like, can everybody really be loving this that much? But they were, and if correct me if I'm wrong, is the mushrooms in there, it's like a fungi that they've cultivated to grow like a beef or something,
I
right?
think that that is correct. We should
Yeah, we should. It's something
probably
along
look
those lines.
in,
Yeah.
but right.
So. It's definitely kind of a next level version. I mean,
Yes.
I never would have known. I never would have known. The breakfast sausage tasted just like a
No,
traditional breakfast.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then to finish out, these were just some of the truly kind of, out there, more innovative, breakthrough innovative products that we saw at the show. The one on the left, I think, is well, actually, the two here are the two that I keep talking about to everybody. But I thought these were potatoes. When we went up to the booth, I thought it was just a Korean potato grower that was, showcasing their potatoes at the show. And then you said, no, these are actually potato bread. And then we
Right.
had them.
Um, these were really delicious. And I thought it was amazing that they were made to look like a potato. They look like a potato, to your point.
Hmm.
They did have potatoes so that you could get confused. There were a lot of potatoes, but they also were using a specific varietal that grows in Korea. So there
Hmm.
is somewhat of a starch and a taste difference, but it is a bun that is potato starch on the outside. You can see the border there with a potato filling. So it's essentially, I don't know that it's healthier, but it is a non-fried way
Hmm.
of enjoying potatoes. And I will admit, I am not a mochi fan because of the texture and the same kind of starchy texture that you get from a lot of baked goods in Asia is not a texture that is necessarily super appealing to me. But these were delicious. And it was really surprising how delicious they were. Fantastic taste, fantastic texture. They looked great. What a great way of rethinking what potatoes can do.
This was one of those products where I hope they get distribution. I hope that I see
Yes.
them at this. I would love to buy them. And again, it's so nice to see so many savory flavor profiles in a snacking occasion, or, that it doesn't always have to be sweet, whether it's this or the protein bars or the lax in a box, or, whatever it may be. It's really nice to see more savory flavors. It almost reminded me of a pierogi filling a little bit in the center. It kind of had that texture and flavor to it. In the
Right. And they
center
were also
here,
good size, right? That they
uh,
weren't so big,
yes,
but they were
yes.
big enough that they were going to be substantial and filling. Yep, absolutely. And then you
Um,
saw the middle one, which I'm sorry
oh
that I
my
did
God,
not
this
see
was
that.
crazy. So this is a food crayon. That's the name of it. Food crayon. And when I went up to the booth, I thought it was going to be a crayon like that a kid would use to, write on a cookie or something like that, like the culinary markers that you see or something like that. But no, so this was started by an artist, and she was working with galleries. I want to say they said in France, and they were doing a meal. And the artist that she was working with was sharpening their pencils, and it got them thinking about the meal. And she said, is there a way that we could have this same kind of experience of shavings and kind of, almost a textural experience with food at our meal? And so she came up with this idea of compressing herbs and spices and citruses into crayons. They actually look like crayons. They're in these little tubes you see in the background. And then the top of it comes with this shaver on it. So I had compressed basil, and then the one she's doing there is lemon. And so you stick it in there and you shave it. It gives you that similar experience to, the cracked pepper, if you're cracking pepper over a dish. She had mentioned that a New Jersey restaurateur had just bought a case of the basil ones to do over pasta. So instead of just doing, Parmigiano Reggiano or something like that, you could do a basil over it. She said the lemon is very popular for cocktails. Do it
Mm.
over the cocktail, it kind of melts into it. It was really new, really just interesting. I still keep thinking about it. And they have something like 57 different flavors. So it was a really wide range of options there. So again, totally new, real talking about breakthrough innovation. And
Well,
then
and
the
Mike,
one on the right here. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, yeah, before you go to the next one, which is also really fascinating, this also speaks to certainly there are a lot of restaurant applications. You and I could rattle off a couple of dozen ways that this could be used for restaurants, but given that consumers are experimenting more at home, that traffic at retail has increased, this kind of a product that allows consumers to feel more gourmet, like they're elevating their own home game without necessarily having to elevate their skill level or elevate the effort that goes into it. This kind of a product can certainly appeal to that issue. I mean, it's a challenge for the restaurants, right? But I mean, that's something that can absolutely do really well with consumers at home.
Absolutely, agreed. And we've spoken actually in our session at the Fancy Food Show about the importance of aroma. And
Mhm.
I think you get that aroma when you're cracking the black pepper. You kind of get it. And so this is the way to get it, as she was doing particularly the basil, as she was cracking, it's releasing, some of those essential oils. So you're smelling it in the way that you don't often get when it's just a dried herb and you sprinkle it over the top. Until you cook with it, do you get that aroma. Here, you actually get it as you release it. And then, of course, in our video-driven day and age, when everybody's taking videos of what they're doing, I mean, this adds kind of that, really hands-on experience that you might want to take a video of, that you might put on social media. And
Absolutely.
then to wrap us up here, so on the right-hand side, this was, and it actually won a Global Food Design Award. And so this is, I want to say it was a Japanese or a Korean company. There's two, you can kind of see it in the corner. There's a quail egg here, and then there's a traditional chicken egg in the center. But it is a shelf-stable, soft-boiled egg. So already really interesting, getting that soft-boiled, texture and flavor that you don't often see. I know we have the hard-boiled eggs that are already at the market, but this is a soft-boiled option. But then it's also, and I don't know how they achieve this, whether it's through, the breed of the chicken or exactly what it is, but 80% of the product is yolk. So it really flips on its head that you're getting most of it being the white, and then that little bit of yolk in the center. You can see in the picture here, it's a lot of yolk in the center there. So it's a very luxurious experience. And everybody wanted to try it. People were really, really curious about it. It is pretty new. They said that they only had kind of a few at the booth there for people to even be able to try, but really, really new product there. And again, really innovative. It's not the same old thing that we see over and over again at the show.
Agreed. Agreed. And the texture there, I mean, for anybody who has the hard-boiled eggs, this definitely does become that next level, right? I mean, hard-boiled eggs are great on their own, but that really just silky texture that you get from the yolk is completely different experience.
Agreed, agreed. And again, it shows how that's, a product in the industry that has evolved as consumers' taste has evolved, as their knowledge has evolved. Decades ago, if you had seen this on your plate, you would, that egg is underdone, take it back into the kitchen. Where now consumers know, I love a soft-boiled egg. You hear that jammy egg phrase all the time. So it just shows, how consumer tastes have evolved and why it is so important to stay on top of them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that overall, the show definitely drove home that there is some incredible innovation happening at the retail level for certain, and that there are a lot of companies, a lot of international companies that are entering the U.S. market with some very interesting ideas.
Agreed. Absolutely. A great, great show. If you have a chance to get to the show, I think we both highly recommend it. But if anybody watching, this is going to be a part of our very first newsletter that is going out next week. So if you watch this and you want to talk through anything that we've seen at the show, or just some of those need states that we talked about, we're happy to do it with anybody watching the video.
Absolutely. So thanks for spending some time with us reviewing what we saw at the Fancy Food Show, and hopefully we'll see you at one of the events coming up in the next couple of months.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.